republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we don't have anybody signed up for the citizens forum, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. I hereby move to adopt the consent agenda. Hearing no objections, the consent agenda is approved by unanimous consent. We'll move on to our agenda. We'll start with Allison's update.
Okay, just a couple things. Right off the top of my head, I was at Fairview today. They had their winter concert, so we kind of closed out our concert season with the elementary schools out at Fairview today. Then moving on into some of the other things happening around the district, we have 4 board members headed to the WASB State Education Conference next week. So maybe on Tuesday, Wednesday, depending on when you're headed down and what your duties are at that convention. So when we come back, we'll report out on that. Act 20 trainings continue in our lower elementary, so K3. Jenny and Rhoda have done a really great job of rolling out this beast, and it continues to bring all of its loveliness with it, and we keep hearing changes every time we go someplace. We hear another change and another tweak. So we continue to work through that. They've been creating videos, and as you know, the early part of February we'll have that day designated where elementary students don't come. It's the day February 3rd, Jenny, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
So February 3rd, we won't have students in the elementary buildings, and teachers will be working on Act 20 all across the board. Even in the upper elementary, they'll be doing some specific trainings around supporting kids. We're also working on our learner profile. Know that we've met with all of our groups, and so the next piece is now to bring our staff back together and to take a little bit deeper dive on what all of the stakeholder groups brought to us as priorities and the results from those focus groups. I have a date for you for the PLC Summit. It's in Madison this summer. We're asking for 2 board members to join our team. It is August 4th through 6th. We usually go down the night before though, so it's really, because it's an early start. Every day is like a 7:30 start. You're meeting with teams. I think it's time. I think it would be wonderful if we had 2 board members join us so that you could have your eyes on what we're doing in that PLC model as we continue to work through it. And then also there was information that should have come to you in your mail about Meet at the Capitol. So this is the day at the Capitol is March 12th. We have, since I've been here, it's only happened one other time just because of COVID, and this is kind of a historical piece that they've done. And so Pulaski has gone on and off. I did find it valuable the last time. Heidi, you were with us last time. It's very up close and personal. You definitely are with your representatives and you're at the Capitol, and probably even it's very valuable because you get to work with their staffers, and their staff really take great notes and they listen and they ask you a lot of questions. So I was actually at my Brown County Superintendent meeting yesterday, and as a Brown County cohort, we're already talking about how this day will look, because when we go, a lot of us share some of the same representatives. So when we go into a room, and Heidi will remember this, one school district will take one topic, another district will take another topic, and we all kind of talk to that point. And it's just a great day to get our voice heard, especially with how things are happening here in the state with our budget and the times of public education. So the morning starts off with usually a kind of a little rally there of our reps, and we talk about the top issues in the state, wrapped around education, and then we move into being able to go out to the Capitol and meet with our representatives. So if you're interested, any of you, all of you want to make it a full day trip, and we all want to go, that's fine. We just would need to know. So we've got a little bit of time, but I'll have Dina probably just send something out, and then we'll see who would like to go, who wants to take part in that. And if you don't, and none of you want to go, we probably will still send a team here from the district that will go and represent us, and that's okay too. Okay. So any questions on that? You should have gotten this, and I can send you that electronically as well. I did ask you for a grade band that you would be interested in, or kind of, a certain section of grades that you would be interested in for shadowing a student. More information will come. I've sent you an overview of what that day will look like. Again, that's on February 12th, so make sure that you have that date marked, and I have all of that information, so thank you very much for getting me that information. And I don't have any preliminary second Friday count. It's just too early. We're working on snapshots, but we just don't have that yet, so I have that for you. I'll probably just send that in a weekly update, just so you kind of know what's happening. That isn't something you need to approve, it's just an informational item for you. Right now, our numbers look good, but we just want to make sure we have solid information before we put that out. Okay? Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you. All right, and we will start our field trips. First one is PHS Wind Ensemble to Whitewater.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Tom Bush. The wind ensemble is a little bit confusing. It's not the wind ensemble. It's 4 students that have been selected for an honors band. In the past, I think it was since '94, we've had students be selected for this Wisconsin Concert Band Association honors group. They have a conference and convention. It moves about. This year it's back in Whitewater as it was last year. We had students participate the previous 2 years who were selected to be a part of this. So on their end, it's quite an honor to be recognized and selected. We nominated 8 students, 4 were selected. And it's depart on Friday and return Saturday. It's an overnight, it's a concert on Saturday night, so an overnight on Friday night. So that's the long and short of how that looks. They have their conductor is director of bands from Vandercook Conservatory of Music in Chicago, with a very long history and some really great stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they have to say and share, or he has to say and share, from my own perspective. But any questions, if I can, or thoughts?
There is a student cost that's not being covered by the music boosters. Is there any issue with those 4 students?
The boosters they have already paid for everyone. The students, as with any honors program, whether it's the state honors, which is around $500, the students and families are asked to pay for half. So far, I haven't had anyone come back and say that this is not affordable, but we do have safety points, if you will, with finances that we never let anybody sit home.
Thank you. All right, any questions for Tom?
No, I'll make a motion to approve the PHS Wind Ensemble field trip as presented.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Have fun.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Appreciate it.
All right, next up is Egg Travel Club. That's the one I want to go to. Who's doing this one?
The egg science one. Caleb's not here tonight. However, a couple years ago, he came and presented in regards to taking July of 2025, a group of students and a travel club to the Dominican Republic to do some experiences within agri-science. So just him being the planning person that he is, he thought he'd get on the docket as soon as possible for the summer of 2027. So that would be available for our current 6th through 9th grade students 2 years from now. So it'd be 8th through 11th graders at that time, going into that following year, to have the opportunity to go to France and Italy to experience very similar. So it's one that we've approved in the past, and he's just being very proactive. They get it on the docket early. Regarding, there's the question of the cost and all those things. Knowing him, he will put together lots of opportunities to help families and students fundraise and do different things as well. Typically, when we've had these experiences, there's maybe a dozen or so kids that potentially, I'm trying to remember what he said, I think 6 or 7 if I remember correctly. So it's a smaller number of kids that participate based on the interest level.
So is that number set, Pat? I mean, or it could fluctuate, right? I mean, because we're talking 2 years from now.
That's a definite approximate,
Yeah.
yes. I think it's the best numbers they have with today's situation.
So if it changes, like, what's the tipping point on chaperones? Like, you guys would come back to us?
Yeah, we would look to make sure that it's a safe situation where, all of a sudden, or if there was 10 or 12 kids and And the organization that we work through, would have places for them to reside that were approved, then we would certainly be looking to add a chaperone kind of to that 6 to 7 to 1 kind of ratio.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the Agri-Science Travel Club to Italy and France as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Pat. All right, next up is Fishing Club to Lacrosse.
Hello, everybody. Phil Morgan, graduate of 2011 from Pulaski High School. A teaching graduate, that is. Decided to do some things to keep myself busy, and one of those was to get a fishing club started at the high school. And we've been engaged. We started out with small numbers. 2019, we were state champions at the venue that we're going to be going to this year, lacrosse in the Mississippi River System, pools 7 and 8, which are, it's not on the river, just to alleviate any concerns there. The water is frozen, it's backwaters, it's sloughs, it's areas that have been checked out. It's sponsored by the WIFA, a statewide organization of volunteers that got together and thought they would form like a fishing league. And so this year we've been meeting every Wednesday at the high school. Our numbers are up, we got about 20 students, and we've got to knock that down to 12 as the students are trying to meet certain standards to qualify to be on this team. And the dates are February 14th, Friday the 14th, leaving on Friday, staying overnight Friday night, and likely the tournament is Saturday, and we'll be coming back mostly Saturday, Saturday before the night comes around. And some of the families that are helping us will maybe stay over as well. We have some really good parent support. So we're asking the kids to kick in $20 to pay for some of the accommodations, and we have a treasury that's been built up through donations and sponsorships. So kids' out of pocket for them is $20. If their parents come along, then of course they're on the hook just like I am for gas and whatever else the expenses are. But it's a great opportunity. I am very excited the way these parents they've just stepped forward without any. I didn't say to the kids, can you bring your mom or dad or someone to a meeting? They just showed up. So in fact, they're so excited that we're going this weekend. We're taking a group, all volunteers, parents, like a mini vacation, I guess, because of the school being out of session on Monday. So they're going to go Saturday, Sunday, and come back Monday. So with that, is there any questions for us?
Motion to approve the fishing trip for the fishing club.
I second that.
A motion and a second. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you. All right, and last one is Becca to Lake Geneva.
Okay, Mrs. Baranchek, our teacher and advisor, isn't able to be here this evening, but I had a chance to speak with her, and this is our state DECA competition. And so it's happening over 3 days, the 24th through the 26th, down in Lake Geneva. And we have a handful of students that have advanced and who are eligible to compete at the state tournament. So we want to support them and send them on their way, and hope things turn out well for them. Similar to previous questions, there is a cost to students, and if that cost is prohibitive to any of the students, we do have means to assist them.
I'll make a motion to approve the DECA field trip to Lake Geneva.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is SRO updates.
How's this thing? Good evening, you guys. Hopefully all you guys have this report and maybe had a chance to take a look at it. We can kind of go through it. I don't think we need to go line by line, but I'll certainly answer any questions for you. But what this is kind of very similar to the last one. For instance, page 2, 3, and 4 is going to be the breakdown of each SRO's based on their activity log. So every day, every SRO keeps an activity log of their time spent throughout the day, where they are and what they're doing. It's important to note that it's not an exact minute per minute account, so it's not going to include travel time or their lunch or any. It's the time that they're spent at the schools. And then, so after that gets broken down, then like on page 5, that will be a breakdown of these categories that we kind of determined to be the most important aspects of the SRO. And this is cumulative for all 3 SROs. So that would be like there on the August one on the right side. So it just kind of goes through August. This is the semi-annual August, September, October, November, and December, and it's a nice snapshot of seeing where the percentage of their times are broken up and what they're doing. And then on their activity logs, they will code different things that they're doing, whether it's the student relations or education or presentations, and that's where we get those numbers from. So the SRO takes all that information, they compile it, and then I put it into these nice charts and graphs. Without having to go through every single page, does anybody have any questions?
I just have a question. I know we've revamped the process where we're kind of reintroducing the education and presentations portions, and we're showing that there's more time being spent on this. How are those education and presentations going at each of the school levels?
I will let each SRO speak to that.
So just 1 second, you all have another handout of a graph and the numbers kind of compressed as well of where they're being done. So just as we're going through numbers, there's another, I had Dana put something in for kind of the whole report all compiled together. Okay, go ahead, give us an update, guys.
Sure. Yeah, so for me starting as my first full year doing this, obviously it was a learning curve for me, but it's been going very well. The lessons are being received by students and teachers and are very appreciative of the lessons that are being taught. So I feel that they've been going pretty well for me.
I guess I'll go next. I would say, same as Josh, just finished our first full year doing this. All the lessons are going well. I just had a conversation with Principal Wells a couple weeks ago after I did the second grade Get to Know Me one. So back in November, we had a conversation after that one. She talked to the teachers. The teachers thought that they went very well too. So I would say, everything's going well with the lessons.
For me, it's pretty cool seeing support, especially at Glenbrook. Mr. Sufco was in mine yesterday for a little while. All the staff is in there and stuff, and it's pretty fun, especially a lot of my lessons now, Blue's coming along with. So we cut the lesson portion, get it in, let the kids then obviously pet Blue and interact with Blue because that's all they really care about. But then high school kids, it's pretty cool. I'm trying something different every month. A new topic is coming out that's always presented in homeroom, where the media kids interviewed me, and then we present those topics kind of every month there. And then today I was just in criminal justice class with the kids. They weren't too talkative too much. It's their last day in that class, so I think they just want to get out of there. But it's pretty good, especially at the high school level, asking to be a part of things, or teachers just coming up and wanting more information from us or to interact more, which is pretty cool.
So I had Dana just compress this, like student relations, educations, and presentation safety meetings by building for us from all of you combined for the entire duration of time that's presented. And my big thing's been making sure that we're covering all the buildings fairly equally. I know the high school and middle school are going to be different, they have very different needs. But can you just kind of talk me through, so looking at this, I know you guys don't have it right now, but looking at student relations, is this a reporting issue? Or so student relations, Glenbrook had 29, Fairview had 3, Sunnyside had 7, Lenoy had 187, and Hillcrest had 151 during this duration. So what's different?
Well, the schools are different, right? I mean, and what each SRO has to do with those schools is different. And I think what each SRO may not code, they might code a student relation different than a different SRO. So that could definitely play a factor in it. But I think obviously the middle school and the high school are gonna take more of the SRO's time in other areas than maybe Zach would have at Hillcrest, Illinois. And I think it's just I think that plays a big factor in it. And I don't know what you're looking at, but when you look at Illinois and Hillcrest compared to Sunnyside and Fairview, how much time is being spent at each school by an SRO?
Well, the hours aren't quite as drastically different as Sunnyside is 125 hours total with all the SROs, 119 from Josh, and Lenoir is 131. So within 6 hours of time,
Right.
but 184 different interactions. So
I think it would be coding is what because when I'm there, it's constant student relations. It's just how it's being documented, I guess, that we'll have to make sure we're on the same page with that. But obviously at each school, it's constant student relations. So that's how it's maybe coded on there a little differently.
Yeah.
We'll have to touch base with all of us
Go ahead.
to form the same process of how we're coding it.
yeah.
So like a good example that I can just think of right off the top of my head would be like every day at Hillcrest from 11 to 11:15, I have a student that I work with. The homeroom teacher asked me to work with that student. He has some behavior issues, so like that 15 minutes every single day. Whereas Hunter or Josh might code their morning where they're doing student relations is one thing. I would code that 15 minutes. I would put that specific 15 minutes in my log, and if I did something during the half hour before that, I would put that in my log. So that would be two different things for me, where they might code their morning of student relations. I would code each different thing that I do.
Or like a lunch period for a 2-hour block of lunch. It's just constant student relations with all the kids, hanging out with the kids. So then that's deemed as one for that whole section of lunch.
Is there any value in that category? I mean, if it's a positive interaction, right?
Yeah.
If you're just saying hi to a kid and you check one, is there any value in that number?
Well, I would argue that there is because I do like I just said, every day for every single day for
And that's
15
what you're
minutes.
coding
I work with the student. We spend the first 5 minutes. We do whatever work they're working on in the room, and then we talk about how his day's going for the next 10 minutes, and we take a break. And if he's having a bad day, we'll talk more about why his day is going bad. So I would say that yes, there is value in that section because that's something specific that I'm doing every day that does provide value back to the students in the school district.
I think to your point, we would have to make subcategories to that, where everything that they do would have to fall into this certain subcategory for it to fall under the umbrella of student relations. Because right now it's just what they feel is like a standout student relation, and that could be different from each SRO's perspective.
And the
right?
time chunk could be different based on the perspective of what you're doing.
Yeah, so in one aspect, Josh could have somebody that comes into his office to grab a piece of candy, and that turns into a 15-minute interaction, and he'd be like, ooh, that's a good student relation, I'm gonna write that down. Where the same thing could happen to Hunter, and he may not say, oh, that's a student relation, I was just chatting with an individual. It's not a perfect science, we're just trying to give somewhat of an idea.
Yeah, so when I use the word value, it's not equal value, right? So if I see 1,000 versus 50, to me it doesn't matter, right? It's just, because again, it's positive stuff. Now, we were talking about truancy, that'd be a different conversation. Like, why is there so much truancy at Lenoir versus the high school?
Yes.
But in this case, the officers are dealing with students or working with students in different ways, and that's why the numbers are going to vary.
It could, and like I said, just because there's no rhyme or reason to what they deem as a documented student relation.
Yeah, so let's just get clear reporting, I guess. Like, if you guys can get on the same page, because when I look at a number where one school has 3 and one school has 187, we just have to make it make sense, right? When we're looking at this. So however that reporting's going, so you guys are being consistent, so if you talk to 5 people at lunch, then your number is 5, right, during that period, or however you want to report it, just so we're consistent between departments.
Yeah.
Because I don't, now it's up here, I think. I don't
What
see
would
it.
you kind of like to see? Because like,
What
for
would you
example, at like high
like to-
school, I mean, you were there today, Jennifer, I know Chief stepped in my office, like at times, there's 8 kids interacting with Blue. So like, I mean, you could, literally, that's 8 different interactions with kids. So like, high school, those numbers could drastically inflate itself. Frankly, I don't have time to type each single
That goes
one.
back to
Do
my
we
question.
need to do it at all? I mean, when he asked you about the value, I think that was of course there's huge value when you're spending 15 minutes with it. Is it worth coding it? Do we need to code it?
That's up to you
Especially
guys.
if you are
Like,
coding and
this
thinking
document
different, you
is
do.
fluid. We can change it
Yeah.
however you
I would
guys
say
want.
if there's a consistency, so you guys
Yeah,
come
right.
up with
That's
it. Like if it's hey, I spent some time at Hillcrest, so I'm having student relations. Maybe it's not the 15-minute one spread out with every student relation. Maybe you guys just come up with however the 3 of you decide is appropriate to, so that you're kind of coding it in like kind.
It kind of
honestly,
seems like student relations fell into just like the
Yeah.
other category.
There's a lot there.
And like
Yeah.
where you have instances with training and safety and things like that where you have an actual like moment or a check mark. I think student relations just became like the catch-all. So if you can,
Well, I don't think we should waste our time counting people, right? I mean, that's my
right? Like that's
And
a,
you have to have a category for Blue then,
I mean,
My point, you guys are there, you're gonna be interacting with students all the time, so to me, it's an assumption-based thing. And to make you guys stress out over, how many did I have? To me, that's where the value part comes in. It's valuable what you're doing,
That's what
but how
I
much value is in there in the recording process, as long as we're all on the same page of what that means.
Right.
Yeah, that's up to you guys. It makes perfect sense. Because when I visited Hunter, he was having lunch with a student in his office. I don't know if he coded that as student relation, but that was a half hour of his time that he was interacting with that student. That does make a difference. So there's constant student relations that's going on. So if you guys just want us to eliminate just that one category, and you guys just know that they're out there doing what they're supposed to be doing, then we just move on with the rest of them. And even this document, I mean, if you guys would rather me put it into a different format, I can certainly do that. I just came up with this. If this is too much and you'd rather have it simplified, I just need somebody to give me the Excel sheet, and I have no problem changing how that's presented.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about it, just consistency is all I'm looking for. I mean, it's obviously a reporting issue, right? I'm sure that you've talked to more kids than 3 at Fairview.
Right.
So, right.
Right.
And I just have a question on in kind of the topics. What's the difference between like safety and trainings?
So safety would be something that they do specifically at the school, like a drill, or if they walk around the school and they're pulling doors, something that they're doing. The trainings are what the SROs are doing. They're getting trained. They're going to something, not for students, for them, for themselves.
Okay,
So
thank you.
education and presentations is when you're in a classroom.
Yes.
Okay, so then those numbers, are we gonna get to every classroom this year?
As far as you guys are all, I think we're all on track.
K5, yeah.
Yes, K5, 100%.
Okay,
And then like 6-12, it's specific kind of lessons for each one, not like, Spanish class, math class. We're not going into all those in given presentations. It's usually grade base level stuff, 6 through 12. That is part of it, like criminal justice for me, or interview techniques and whatnot that I may go into.
They team teach with our counselors, so there's some that you're doing jointly on different units. That's mainly middle school and high school, but there are some elementary too.
A K5, yes, twice a year, every single grade we interact with.
Yeah, actually for K5, it's not every classroom once a year, it's every classroom twice a year.
so then we got some work to do though, right? That's, I mean, when I look at education.
Well, so
and
then
present-
again, this might be another conversation. I see what you're getting at. This might be a conversation.
So like first grade is one.
So like for example,
Second grade,
Hunter and Josh I know
one.
teach theirs as a big group, where I teach mine each individual classroom. I go to each individual classroom. So then every time I teach, just the way my coding is very detailed. Everything is, what I do. So if I go into a classroom, I taught 3 separate lessons. So that's probably, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, because right now we've only been we've done 7 at Glenbrook. So when I think of just how many first grade classrooms are in Glenbrook, how many second grade classrooms, so that's the math I'm doing in my head. And then it looks like we have a long ways to go. But you guys are doing all of first grade together?
Whereas I do each individual classroom.
Gotcha.
So like Glenbrook, there's 4, so technically it's 4 lessons, right? But Candace, Ms. Bogach here, she makes it a lot easier on me because of time constraints and whatnot, that she will put all 4 classrooms together in each presentation. So I don't have to repeat 4 separate times the same exact thing. We have the space here, the availability of that. Other buildings, obviously like Hillcrest, under construction, you may not have a room that you can fit 2 or 3 classrooms in. But yes, every single grade has had the same amount of lessons, K through 5. We're consistent every month, it's a different grade level, but every single grade that we've been to has had 1 specific lesson so far, and then in spring is the second one.
So do you think that you're able to build relationships with that? I guess I was unaware that we were bringing all 100 first graders together in the building. I guess I need clarification on that, I'm not as comfortable with that, I guess, as I was thinking that we were at least breaking those groups down a little bit smaller. So then if you are doing it twice a year, that way, bringing them together in those large groups, I would almost see that we could probably meet with those kids 3 times a year, and if we're putting them together in the really large group. But I don't know. I guess that would be something that if the counselor and building leaders
That's what
decided
they
together
decided.
with you. Yeah. Okay.
Kind of coming from Mr. Sufka and then Ms. Bogach, obviously it's
I guess
easier
I'll
for them
ask
too.
Julie, or did you know? Was that something that you guys had talked about, bringing the whole grade level together?
I just leaned over to her and asked her if she knew about it because we were in the meetings when we were planning and neither one of us were aware of that.
Well, I'll just ask you guys this. Do you feel like you are able, do you think, because these are bigger buildings, right? So do you feel like the kids can connect with you when you're in that big group? That's part of it for me. I guess I was thinking when you're with a counselor and you're in the group of 20 in the classroom, I think that would be more personal for the kids, but I don't know, maybe there's still really good connections with the kids.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good, and from kind of for your end, you could ask Mr. Sufka, he was in there yesterday or the day before, seeing the lesson taught and everything, and 5 staff members are in there. Kids are getting the same message, and it's pretty nice, it's pretty easy. Kids are very, very good here for me to be able to do it, listen very well, attentive throughout it. And we still get that personal connection of, the question asking and whatnot. So I personally think it's very, very good and effective here. Especially, if we break up the 4 or 5 classrooms of the kids, now that's 3 hours.
Would you be able to do something like, okay, so we teach universal, or, we get the big lesson with all the kids together, and then I know there's always carryover, right? They go back to their individual classrooms then, and there's probably carryover and questions and things happen later on, maybe even with Candace or with their teacher. I wonder if then that would be an opportunity where you guys could be doing that spot checking individually in those classrooms. I think we owe that to our kids to kind of have more of that individual feel. Josh, how is it for you then at Sunnyside? Do you do the big group like that as well?
Yes, so at Sunnyside, the administrators there, principals there, and the teachers, they talk with each other to see what is the best fit for that class. If it
Meaning the whole grade level,
yeah,
or just
like
that
they'll
individual?
ask the teachers, and then they'll ask is it best to bring them all together, or is it best to do it separately based on how they feel that the students are gonna handle and what's best for. If they bring in too many kids, then they feel like they're not really gonna get that one-on-one type.
Okay.
And so then they kind of like break it up and they do it in different things like
Okay.
that.
Okay.
But
Well, I think that's just something more for you guys to talk about with your building.
So I guess I do have a question, like your lesson that you went over, Hunter, you're talking about, like how long, like do we How long are
30
these
minutes.
classes? 30 minutes. Okay. So I mean, theoretically, we have enough time in the schedule to break it all down by classes if we have to.
It's up to the administrator.
Theoretically and
I mean, the hours
Yeah.
are there.
theoretically, yeah, but the hardest thing for me, especially with here and then the high school, is the 30 minutes that having the 4 classrooms, I can strictly focus on the 30 minutes there with those kids. If we separate it like it has been separated in the past, to fit all those lessons in, I'm gonna get called away frequently to go to the high school. So then it's rescheduling, trying to find those times again and taking that time out of the teacher's schedule. It's feasible and possible to do. Is it the most efficient way? I don't believe so.
And I've also ran into issues at Sunnyside and Fairview with the amount of lessons, and that works best for the teacher's schedule, and trying to fit in all of them at different times too has been difficult where they overlap, or we, have a difficult time sometimes putting them all together. That works best for that class when they have an opening and fitting into the schedule that I'm on too. So it is, even for mine at Fairview and Sunnyside for the K-5, with that, but it can be done. It's a lot of time.
Yeah, so if it's 4 classes, 30 minutes each, so instead of doing all of them at once, it's 2 hours instead of 30 minutes. Can Josh or Zach be on call for the high school? Does it have to be?
Yeah, I
before?
mean, I guess
Give some
from
flexibility
my
there?
standpoint, I mean, you're looking at, so like Fairview has, say, 7 classes. I mean, that's 14 hours through the year. I don't really think that's a lot. I mean, out of 180 days, I mean, you could, I think it's pretty feasible,
Can you guys figure that out? Is that doable to get into the classrooms, each one of them?
Yeah, it's
It's kind of what the administrators were kind of.
Right, so a message would have to come from Madison to the administrators of those schools, like, this is the way we're going to do it.
But do we prioritize, so I don't even know what the 4 lessons are, to be honest with you. Do we prioritize which ones are important? So to Hunter's point, again, we don't want to add additional pressure to the job you guys are already doing to protect our children and staff. So what lessons are most important? So if you don't get to it because of getting called away, we're not just slinging a lesson in just to call it good. We just say we didn't get to it because of. So if we go back to the break it up format and now that's more time slots, then if you don't get to it, at least we can explain why, but we got the most critical ones done if that's measurable.
It is, and it isn't, right? But only for the fact of like the kids know when we're coming, so they're excited for that 30 minutes, right? So then we get called away or we don't reschedule it for that time. Like in that kid's mind that day, it's, oh, Desro didn't have time or didn't care to come to that. And I'm a big proponent of never having the kids feel that way. So it is feasible. Adam and I did it prior. It's a lot on us SROs to accomplish, and you're going to see it. If we do it here at Glenbrook, you're going to see Josh's numbers diminish time-wise at Sunnyside, Fairview Middle School, because he's going to have to go to the high school. It's up to you guys if that's okay. But at high school, it is a different animal in itself to accomplish certain things there, but it is feasible to do.
Zach can't take calls to the high school?
Well, on Wednesdays. I mean,
Any
he's
other
not
time,
gonna come from, I don't know that he would come from Angel can speak to it, but.
That's something that we can be open to and we can discuss.
Yeah, I think we can find some medium ground here. I do think that I don't think it's a bad thing that you're meeting with all first grade kids and talking about stranger danger at the same time. I really don't. We always know that there's, going to be the 20 questions and, and it might end up being they're asking about your radio line or uniform, right? I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's the, how do we connect? We did the big talk, and now how do we connect back with those kids individually in classrooms so that it isn't, I think on paper it does look really easy for them to fit the schedule in, but I do think that it would be a challenge for you, especially in Glenbrook and working at the high school. But I think that we can find some medium ground, as long as we're connecting back to those individual classrooms. When you're at those schools, just start making the list, hey, I was in this individual classroom and I stayed for 15 minutes, I did a stop in. I think that would work. I don't think that there's a principal on our staff, and I don't think there's a teacher in our buildings that wouldn't welcome you just popping in and, visiting in the classroom. So maybe we just need to circle back on that and just talk about how that's put forth and laid out.
And I could answer to that at Sunnyside when I'm out there for my time periods. Other than the lessons, I stop in every class, usually walk in every class, probably 2 times each class, and stop in and have conversations with each kid or help them with their work or just hang on and build those relationships there, other than in the lunchroom where I'm really doing that one-on-one with a lot of the kids more than just the specific lessons too.
And I think we've talked about before, this is that great opportunity for using those large common spaces in our middle school and now in our elementary schools, where we do have lots of education out in front of our kids too when you guys are there, where you're just popping down at the table and, hey, we did the lesson on stranger danger, now I'm in the 1st and 2nd grade lunchtime, and now kids are going to know that I did that, and let's have talks around it. Let's do something about that. So I think we've got some opportunity to grow.
I did send this to Colton so he could pull it up, and this is on our public website. So as our public curriculum mapping website. So as you're wondering the curriculum that they're teaching. Last year, 2 times we brought committees of counselors and teachers from each of the grade bands, and we kind of had subgroups. Then a middle school and elementary and a high school group worked together with our SROs, and then they developed the curriculum. And so you can kind of see the course overview and the rationale that of what encompasses all of K-12. And we didn't write this specific for each class. You can see under the unit we attached their pacing guide that they created. And so if you want to open that up, Colton, it will lay out at each of the levels then. So you got to open up the next one, the SRO pacing guide, and then they have lesson plans as well. But it kind of shows when that committee came together. So it's probably better if you log in when you're looking at it, but it has a link also to each of the grade levels and what they're covering and kind of what the outcomes are so that they're consistent. And then if they did have a presentation or a resource that they were using, they inserted that as well. And so that is out there for the public to see as well, but this is kind of what they're focusing on at each grade levels. And then Hunter or somebody had given us the lesson plan unit, and so that was the other link that's in there as well. So that's when they talk about when they're going into classrooms, this is how we're trying to make it consistent, no matter which building that they're in, they're using a consistent presentation, consistent outcomes that they want.
Is that working well for you guys? Kids receive it well?
Something we've kind of always taught, K through 12, it's just in a very pretty format now. And have learning targets and whatnot and presentations that are part of it. It goes pretty good. Obviously, it's first year Josh and Zach have taught the lessons, so I'm sure they're getting more comfortable every time they're doing it and whatnot, compared to they've done it for a while. So they're consistent. It's nice having a consistent basis with each individual school and having the same general stuff being taught to them.
So where do we sit? Are they trying to figure out how to split these up, or are we staying the way it is? Because if we're splitting it up and they're gonna figure that, I'd like to see what the impact of the schedule at the schools is with officer presence. Because I think we would need to evaluate what's more important, right? If it's gonna impact Josh's ability to be at Sunnyside right now where they're 125 hours, it's gonna be way less than that. I think we need to consider that too in the decision.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be strategic with the scheduling, right? You wouldn't schedule Hunter to be teaching when Josh is in Sunnyside. You would schedule Hunter to teach when Josh is at the middle school. So, you wouldn't try to pull more hours out of our elementary schools, I wouldn't think. So it takes some strategic scheduling for sure, and collaboration between all of you.
It's the first year. I feel like there's gonna be, pivots and adjustments of, what this all looks like. We've never had 3 SROs before, right? So It's all just getting on the same page of how you log the time, how you do the trainings and things like that. I had a question, and again, this could be another thing of how one interprets it or, documents another. For admin time, can you explain like what that is for each of you, I guess, like what you are actually putting in for that time or what that looks like for you?
Yeah, that was my coding mistake on that one.
This one's updated.
Oh, this was updated?
This one
Oh,
is
okay.
this one is updated.
Okay.
I was able to fix it.
Yeah, so I would like, for specific things that did need to be, are they looking at the one that I gave them, that you gave them initially?
It
Yeah.
must be because yours is
Yes.
like off the charts compared to.
Yes.
Sorry, I
So,
didn't want to
like,
call you out.
It was my mistake, I was adding in admin in there on like, and I was still listing like days
Days
that I
off.
was off for like holidays or
Oh.
whatever it was with that, or
Lunches.
lunches I was putting as admin, that should have been left blank. So I corrected all that, that's why it looks like there's a lot more admin time.
See, I figured there was a
That was my
explanation for it.
mistake. Won't look like that for next one.
But typically that would be any, like, when they're doing reports, if they have to come back to, for us anyway, it might be different for Zach, but when they come back to the police department, if they have to download body cam, take care of evidence, if I ask them to come back because they wanna, I need to talk to them, anything that's not directly related to one of the schools, they would typically list as admin time, just as kind of like that general, at least we're coding someplace where that time is going.
Is that kind of what you're doing as well, Zach, with yours?
Yeah, I was just talking to Angel
Oh,
about that.
okay.
Like, so I know like I have admin time from, like, for example, going to download a phone or something. If we have to go to the sheriff's office, so that would be like one example that I had. So something like that, similar to what they're doing, like with evidence for investigations. So yeah, similar.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
All right, well, we'll work with, meet up with Allison, we'll kind of work on some of the things that you guys addressed and see if we can change that. And I'm guessing probably for the next school year, because I think this last half is kind of already planned, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of plans already put out, like all the Sunnyside's lessons are all put out, all the Fairviews are put out.
So this might have to be a work in progress, but we'll continue to work on it.
Perfect.
Thank you
All
all.
right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. All right, animal space.
Not safe.
Bill?
I didn't want to tie him to the doorknob if he needed time out for myself. It's getting crazy.
Guess we gotta go slow in the village now.
For a couple minutes. Not double lady. All right, who's doing, are you open enrollment?
So each January, by the end of January, we have to set our open enrollment spaces. Good and bad, I mean, it's just a requirement, but you still don't know some of your numbers, like for 4K, which isn't a big one, but kindergarten is the one that always is concerning for us. And you just don't know movement in and out of the district, especially in summertime, when you're going to pick up students. But they have you set the numbers so that you're not adjusting it later on, and now suddenly we're going to accept this family, we're not going to accept this family. You have to go by your numbers. And so each January we bring you a memo. It's pretty consistent in what it does have in it. We've linked in here also the open enrollment interdistrict link to the policy 5113. So that is in here as well for information. So what we have to do is we really look at our projected staffing along with our projected enrollment and our maximum class sizes, and we try to set numbers both in student services for special ed students as well as regular education. So I kind of take care of the regular ed part. Julie and Laura take care of the student services with special ed services. The one thing that I would say is the numbers that we set and the staffing that we have in here isn't necessarily the staffing that we'll bring forward to you. So sometimes we might keep that staffing lower so that we do have open enrollment space. Sometimes we keep it higher because we think that it's going to be a larger class, and so that we have to watch it. So I do have that bolded because sometimes people are like, they're already looking at this like, oh my God, this building's going to go down a teacher, that building's going up a teacher. That may or may not happen. It's once we get into our true staffing, and right now our secretaries are calling all of the families that are potential for kindergarten to see whether they're coming or not. So that usually takes us a month or two to sort out and get that input from the parents of what their plans are. In the meantime, Dana has sent out letters to our 4K students who were accepted last year in open enrollment, which means they're accepted then all the way through. And so then now she asked them specifically to rank which buildings they're interested in to come for kindergarten, and then whether they're coming or not. So in some cases, they only come here for 4K, and then they switch to their regular district or where daycare might be, whatever it might be. So with that, you also do have a spreadsheet that we work off of. So it has formulas within it, and when you're looking at that spreadsheet, we go for 4K specifically. We just base on how many seats are within that section or we could hold. So you can see in 4K we could go up to 272 students, which then based on that formula of 20 students per classroom or per section tells us that we have 30 openings of what we could accept for students. But you'll see at the top of that spreadsheet as well, 4K we use 20 students. Fairview, because it's a full day, we have one up to 22 students once or twice, so that one we bump up a little bit. And then you can see for K through 1, in any of our buildings, we use 22. For 2nd through 5th grade, we use 24, with the exception of Glenbrook, because it's an AGR school, we use 16. For K3 and for Fairview, because they used to be a SAGE school, which is now called AGR, we've capped them at 18 students that we would go up to in planning our open enrollment. So now when we take those numbers and we transfer them to the sheet, and we recommend our open enrollment to you, you can see 4K is the 30 students. You'll notice that kindergarten and 1st grade are low on what we're saying we would accept this year. 12 spots in kindergarten, 9 spots in 1st grade. You can see that last year we were at 20 for kindergarten and 42 for 1st grade. I was a little bit concerned with that because obviously kindergarten you're nervous about, that's where you usually get them and you keep them then. So I was concerned like, are we going to be turning kids away? And then you see our historical average just says 21, and that's 21 students total. So that means they might have been accepted in 4K and they're continuing in kindergarten, and they've also, other families have applied in kindergarten. So that I had to go back to Dana and say 21 isn't actual applications for kindergarten that year, right? So she ran those numbers for me, and we average 11.6. So there was one year it was 14, everything else has been 12 and under. So we think we'll still be okay based on that historical 5-year of what she ran for me. 1st grade, when we ran that number, just to, because it says 17, well again, you have to remember that is 4K when they were accepted, that's kindergarten if they applied, and 1st grade. So that historical average has been 17. When she ran it for me, our average was like 4.55 students apply actually in 1st grade. So we had some conversations, are we okay with these numbers? Are we going to be turning away families? We think we're okay based on that historical 5-year.
Is that true at the middle school?
Yeah.
Well, the middle school is, and I made a change this year. The last 2 years we ran it that it was group grades 6 through 8. And then it would have say that number of 59 was what we could accept. The other thing with the middle school is the number we used was 30. So, we said maximum class size for middle school is 30 teachers between your cores, 900 kids. Meant that year probably when we ran it, there was, 251 right? 241, 241 or 841 students. It was open for, there was 58 spots. We are tight. We're meeting with PEA. I kind of left that meeting and I'm like, I think I got to structure this different. Last year we did not accept any 7th graders because that was such a large class. So we said no to people. That means that large class is now 8th graders. So we would be saying no to 8th graders. 7th grade, the incoming class is going to be large as well. So the only place where we would be accepting students open enrollment would be grade 6. And at this point would only be 7 spots. And what I did do in this case for 6th grade is I dropped it down to 27 students instead of 30 students. So that's how I got my number, was 27 times 10 sections, 270 kids. They must have had, 263 must be what they're projected to have this year.
Do you think that that's going to affect family decisions if the middle school is that tight?
It could. I mean, obviously, like last year we had to have some tough conversations with families that really wanted their kids here in 7th grade, and we were just like, we're at 301. We're not going to, put those sections over like that. And the other thing is you have to keep in mind the families that might be moving in that truly live here and that you're accepting that way.
Right.
So.
With the calculations that you had Dana run at the 1st grade and 2nd grade level, do you know what that 45 number in 6 through 8 actually looks like for students that we, at 6, 7, and 8, what that 45 number is, the real number?
Did you run that?
I did the 7th and 8th.
Oh, you did 7th and 8th?
Yeah, and I put it on that spreadsheet.
Oh, it was on this. Yeah. I pulled up the spreadsheet because I figured you guys would have some questions.
Like how I did it for kinder and first, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that for 7th and 8th.
On the same spreadsheet? Is it a different tab?
It's under historical open enrollment by grade. So the 3rd tab.
No. Oh, so it's on the other spreadsheet. It's on the spreadsheet they have?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we have that.
We have
So 5 for 7th grade and then 4 for 8th grade for like that for that number.
I mean, so we could be turning away people this year, but at the same time, we always have to think fiscally be responsible of, we aren't adding a staff member for open enrollment. We're adding a staff member based on what our enrollment's going to be, because you don't want to get caught and set these numbers high, and then you're adding a teacher just to accommodate open enrollment. So.
Yeah, and not that every decision comes down to dollars, but the math for open enrollment is, you take your 3-year student average, right? So in year 1, the student brings in $8,500 or $8,700, whatever open enrollment is at. If you hire a brand new teacher with health insurance, you need about 8 or 9 kids for that one individual position. So, at an elementary level, if 3 or 4 kids are adding you a class, you have to come up. Budget's going to have to come up with, the $40,000 difference. Middle school plays in that. So that's just kind of the math that, as I look at open enrollment now, the long-term play, right? If you can swing it for a year to add a kindergarten class, and all of a sudden you have 12 years of open enrollment funding, right? It makes sense. But it's that decision of, are you adding it, and how long are the open enrollment students going to stay? So that's just the kind of the math behind it.
So that is where we're at. Grade 9 through 12 would be unlimited. They actually, based on their enrollment, which you can see will drop, they lose a really large class of 324 and they get a smaller class coming in. So they drop about 70 kids, but generally you're able to accommodate them because of their course selections and more opportunities to space them out where it's more difficult kindergarten through 8th grade to do that. And then Julie will talk about special ed.
Yeah, so for students with disabilities, students with IEPs, we look at it a little bit differently. We take all of our teachers, and then we look at our projected enrollment, like at the elementary school, and we come up with the average amount or number of teachers we have. So it's not like by building specifically for this. And we set our mark at the elementary at 7 students. We are also factoring in any referrals that are occurring right now as well. We don't know exactly how the number is going to fall by the end of this year. So that's a factor. At the middle school level, we set our numbers at 13, and at the high school at 16. So you can see on the spreadsheet, there are some grade levels that would be able to accept, but overall as a conglomerate, we are actually over 18 students at the elementary level. We would have space for 18 at the middle school, and we'll have space for 55 at the high school. So essentially, the high school is pretty consistent. The middle school, the reason that went down a little bit for next year is we added a program support teacher internally within the high school to help with that special education compliance and monitoring intervention work, and it was an internal switch. So it just kind of made it so there's less availability for open enrollment at the middle school, but there's still spaces available there. And then for occupational therapy, speech, we're over in those areas as well. As physical therapy would be a contracted service, so we wouldn't provide any open enrollment opportunities for that. So as far as that's.
Any questions on this?
We're a hot spot. People want to be here.
Move to approve the open enrollment spaces as presented.
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Personnel report, Stephanie.
So I have a couple of retirements. We have Clay Riesler, the business education teacher at the high school. He's been with us for 28 years. Mary Jane Klister at Linois, and then McKenna Batlin at Sunnyside in Linois, the school psychologist. She's leaving as well.
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any questions for Stephanie? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, Mark.
Yeah, so, couple items. So there was an ask for a better budget report than what Skyward captures. So Skyward report, still important, right? It's a generated from the system. It's not manipulated. But what this report is kind of more of a executive leadership team forecast is what I would call it. But a couple items I have in the corner there for planning and discussion purposes only. This is not an official budget report. Adopting a budget or making budget changes requires specific notifications to the public. This report doesn't meet that, so I'm not asking for approval. Don't approve it because it's not a real report, right? It looks like it is, but it's not a standard report. So just clarifying that ahead of time. So just a couple of housekeeping things, how the report's set up. It's taken from categories that DPI requires, but I just expanded on a couple of them. So you'll see on the left-hand side, it'll tell you what fund and what item we're talking about. Anything in parentheses I added just because those categories don't always make sense as you look at them. Most of them are just for my personal keeping track of where things are. Moving left to right, then you have final actual. So that's just a reference point. That's last year, what happened. That's audited and done, and actual figures for reference. As we continue to move year-to-date actuals, so that is what is actually recorded as of December 31st. So that would tie to a Skyward report. The category that's new to everybody and takes a lot to go into is projection. So that's saying this is what happened through December, and now this is our best estimate at this time of what will happen January 1 through June 30th. So how I do projections salary and wages, that's a system thing. Skyward, accounts for what everyone's contract is or what everyone's scheduled hours are. So that's something that I can just pull that's generated. The big estimate that has an impact is health benefits. As you know, being self-insured, every week we get a file on Friday that says what was paid out in claims. To project that out, we can go on kind of how we're trending. We have actuary studies from Brown and Brown. So that's a large unknown. It still can be projected, but that's one that we continue to monitor.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask questions about that because that's big, variance. And do you think that, I know you just said that you could kind of break it down more, but when insurance comes, when we come to the time, can we make sure Brown and Brown is ready, with other options, because this may not be suitable for us if this is what claims are looking like.
Sure.
So.
And I think that my statement might have been overtaken. Right now, we charge ourselves at a premium. We're running at 102, 103% of premium, right? So we're over. If I can give my whole insurance spiel, we're in year 2. It's going to come to, eventually we want to go and price it back out to market. Jumping ahead, I don't think this would be the year to do it. We can have the whole conversation now. If somebody bids on it, it would have to be almost a double-digit savings, which I'll be honest isn't going to happen. We can still go through the exercise because we moved all employees to an open network. So now we're seeing individuals switch doctors, go to specialists. Anybody who bids on it in this region is going to be a closed network. So that's a harsh change for employees within 2 years. I think, and honestly, if we do the practice, you're not going to see it. The reason being is, as I get into the report, you'll see we have another individual in our program that offsets high spending. So we have about $1.7 million in claims that we are not paying. You go to an individual provider, they're not going to be able to do that, or an individual insurer. So I think I see insurance is on for February. I think we can have that discussion and have them bring all the information that you want. But I don't want everyone to see that number and say that that's a big change. That's a variance that can change in a month. It could get worse or better, right? So I'll just throw that cap out there. But yes, I think an insurance discussion presentation will be warranted.
Is there some, I just always feel hesitation with presenting the other options, getting us do we have to pay them to bring that to us?
We can. I would want to present something that we're not ready to act on. And in year 1, I wouldn't have seen us changing everyone. It's kind of like, I liken it to your cell phone companies. You could change your cell phone company every 6 months and someone's going to pay off your bill. It's a hassle, right? And we have 450 employees on our insurance. So in year 1, we were just established. And my other thing is, if you're really going to make a change, you want people to bid on it. If you ask them every year, here's our census, come up with a bid. Eventually they're going to say, we're not doing it for you guys. Every year we come up with it. So the 3-year mark was always kind of in my head. If we're directed to say, go ahead and solicit bids in year 2, then we can make them do it. There's no cost to it. We don't have to pay them more. I just don't want to do it and go down one of those paths. So.
Are we in a 3-year contract?
No.
No.
So our third-party administrator is every year. There's nothing that binds us to self-insurance. So I would say the only hesitation is based on the direction I think we're heading in. And that's just based on my judgment, knowing that our insurance bill was looking at a 27% renewal in this year, and we had a flat renewal. So, I hate to say we're playing with house money if we come in at 105%, but we are. And that was a bid that one person bid on. Everyone else declined because of our high-cost individuals. So that's the background of it. I don't have hesitation if I can call Brown & Brown tomorrow and say, take it out to market, we want to see it. Just know that if we're not gonna act on it, that's my balancing act. So, no hesitation, I think we'll throw it on for February and can discuss it further.
So on your projected number, 9.2 million, what's the basis of that number? So I know we have the actuals of 5 million so far, and that's as of August 1st.
Where are you looking, Steve?
I'm sorry, page 2 of 7. The first line under expenditures and other financial.
Yeah, so, for an example like that, knowing why it would be level set, you would think it's December, you should be halfway through, right, if you're so instructional budget is all teachers. Teachers are paid September through August. So right now, we've only paid a quarter of every teacher's contract. What happens is on June 30th, we accrue those salaries. So that's why, again, 80% of our budget being salaries, that's why you would see it so heavy that, about a third has been paid. So a teacher with a contract, their first fiscal payment, and this is September. So what my projection would be for 9 million would be, out of 24 checks, it would be 18 checks remaining.
I'm confused on what you're saying. So here you have the increase in project health insurance expense. Isn't that the question you were just answering for Heidi?
I was, so that includes both. So if you're looking at 9 million, that category, 110000, is all things K-6 education. Every teacher salary, it's not just medical. The reason for the variance that I would put in there, so salaries is right on where we budgeted.
Yep, okay.
So that's why it's not captured in that comment. The variance is benefits, medical benefits.
So as you lay out the projection, minus the salaries, which are set, how are you coming up with the projection for insurance? Like, what are you basing it off? Since we are in year 2.
Yeah, so I'd be basing it off of 103% of premiums.
Okay.
So if I take our $7.5 million, we're gonna run, if we keep going how we're running, we're gonna run 3% over what was expected. And also that could change too of who elected insurance in that category. So we may have had, we charge ourselves a premium. Somebody during the year may have had a child and moved to a family plan, so we charge ourselves more. So there are fluctuations, and even when we set the budget, we don't have all of our staffing done. So there's some natural variances in there where you may see savings on a different category, right?
So if health insurance is baked into those numbers, is there an easy way of pulling that number down? So we know staff salaries went up, and because right now it's about $1 million delta between last year and what we're projecting this year.
Right.
But some of that's salaries, right? So is there any way to show the true medical costs, just so we have an idea? Because right now, if I just looked at that, it's like $14 million, but
Sure.
salaries are in there. I don't know what the difference is.
Yeah, and when any insurance report comes, it's going to show broken down premiums. And this report does it by that way. If we did it by each, if we did 100,000 by each object, salaries, FICA, WRS, it would all break down that way. It's doable.
Okay.
On a Skyward report, I believe it shows it by object. And that would be 241, so you could see. So it is doable. I think for an overall budget, review that we're doing, I think this would be the layout of, at the end of the day, I'm looking at salaries and benefits combined. In a benefit decision, you're gonna want that information broken out. I wouldn't show you this report when we were making a decision on.
Yeah, but the only variable is we're self-insured. So that number is, like, the district owns that responsibility, and that number is like this. If you're in outsourced insurance, it's just flat for us.
Flat, I mean, it would change a little bit as people change elections.
Sure.
And then where you're really, when you're outsourced, the big change is on the next year, right?
Yeah.
I've never been part of an insurance renewal that was below the charge premium. I've always received an increase for 10 years. That's when they catch up, right? Anybody who knows the insurance world, we're not gonna come out ahead and keep that money. They're gonna make it up on the next year. So, but why it's 5 and 9 million? That is all projected salary and benefits. So.
Okay.
just a couple reporting things, like I take that year to date and projected, and that's a total, and then I show the original budget, and then we report out that variance. Now, I label it favorable and unfavorable. That doesn't really mean good or bad, it's a variance. So, you know, if you look at interest rate, right, $80,000 above what we budgeted. There's nothing in there that says we invested everything correctly and we made all the right decisions. It's just saying from where we budgeted, we're $80,000 favorable. It could have been 90, right, if we would have maybe changed something. So it's hard to look at it that way. Same with unfavorable, which I'll get into. But it does talk about discrepancies. So if I go down, we talked about that interest rate. Student fees is just that. You know, the majority of student fees have rolled in for the year. Registration, iPad fees. That's just a factual number of what's still to come in. Open enrollment is current. You know, open enrollment is fluid. If an open enrollment moves out, that funding by the end of the year changes, but you know, that's favorable from where we sit. There's a decrease in grant funding. Those are specialized grants from the state. At the time of budgeting, we don't know those exact amounts. AGR allocation, we do know, increased. Same, you know, the CEIS grant allocation, that was an additional funds. That's a carve out of a grant. So we have more funding there. The large discrepancy in revenues is last year we swapped out our iPad fleet, so all student devices got traded in, and then we went out to resell for them. You know, in September we had shipped them off, but I didn't know what that amount was going to be. We had a general idea, so we didn't budget for it. But that's another one. It's favorable, but that money is already gone. We use that to pay for the next fleet, just how we do with staff computers. It's a trade-off. So you'll see when we get to the expenses that, well, that money came in and wasn't budgeted for. Neither was the expense, the payment of that lease that we took out on them. So on the expense side, we talked about it. So most categories are by educational setting. You know, so that 1,100 is elementary, 1,200 is your 7th through 12. That is not differentiated, I suppose, would be considered regular. Then you have your vocational, your phy-ed, co-curricular would be athletics and whatnot. So it goes down, and then you have all your support services. So pupil services, instructional staff services, mostly under Julie. General administration is your admin across the building, school building, so non-general administration. Business administration is a large one. It includes the business office, but also includes transportation, facilities. Insurance would be in there, debt, Fund 10 debt, and then other support. So we have, it's broken down into those categories as opposed to objects or expense objects, which is how the Skyward reports. So, you know, we hit on health insurance as part of benefits. Small changes in a Perkins grant, that's a vocational grant. When it comes to co-curriculars, if there's a change in an increase in expense, it's usually offset by revenue. That was the fees. So if we host a tournament and everyone pays $300, that's offset by the cost to run the tournament. So athletics would get an increase for what they bring in. So it's not really a variance. It's not a negative variance. It's offset by revenue coming in. A couple of highlights under support services. You know, we just moved salaries from the ESSER grant. That changed it from pupil services, which is how they're coded under the ESSER grant, to a teacher. The CIS budget I touched on. You know, for business administration, we just have a decrease in projected salary and wages. Samaritan Fund, I touched on this one, so it shows up as an unfavorable. We have another high cost claimant this year who moved on to that, so that results in a one-time insurance payment, but then their insurance expenses are covered. So that's one of the examples of that's a huge positive for the district. I touched on the payment of the iPad lease, which we used from the sale of that iPad fleet. And then we can talk about our inter-district transfers, and then decrease in open enrollment which was great, you know, $20,000 favorable, but when our school voucher payment came in, it offset that by $30,000. So that's where we're sitting. But the big thing is those are some large numbers, but right now, just based on projection, it nets out with our increase in revenues.
Back to the iPads.
Yeah.
So why wasn't it budgeted for? Is it because they were delayed getting here? It was in last year's and it didn't hit?
No, I mean, so to sell the iPads, you send them out and they
Yep.
get evaluated. We had an idea. I wouldn't want to include $300,000 of revenue if all of a sudden they get them and they say you had 100,000. Yeah, most of our sale of assets, even if I think we might be selling a bus or anything, is not budgeted for. It just results in a budget increase of offset. So it was planned for, it just wasn't included in a budget line. So when they purchased the iPads and we're trying to figure out what lease they could go up to, we had a sense of there's going to be $200,000 and $300,000 coming in. It just wasn't budgeted for it because it was unknown.
And is it what's the lease payment terms on that? How long do we pay on those?
Oh boy, Bill, do you know how long we have? Is it
Okay, so my question is this, so will it be in next year's budget? If we know what the lease?
Yeah, so the lease payment's known. So off the top of my head, the lease payment is about $280,000. So we structured it that way with a one-time kind of balloon payment up front of $300,000. And in 3 years, I think 3 years is when we swap out iPads. We'll do the same thing.
Okay.
The value of the fleet will allow us to afford the new ones.
Okay.
And I also think with this one, we were planning on having them out to get that price before the school year ended, but something didn't come in.
The cases.
Something didn't come in, and because it didn't come in, we left the kids with their devices, and we didn't collect them until the very end. And
Yeah, that whole debt service payment, that's $655 is all iPads. It's the only thing in there. So if I take out the $325, that's what we paid, $330, and that's a set budget on its own line item.
Okay.
Page 3.
Yeah.
104,000 for instructional service payments, increase in payments for third-party instructional services. Is that special ed? What is that?
Yeah, it is. So page 3 moves on. It's got all of Fund 27, which is special ed. So up top is your revenues. Remember, Fund 27, all revenues have to equal expenses, no matter what. At the end of the day, by Fund 10 transfer, it has to balance out. So kind of the same before getting to that line, and then that would be placements of individual students. I don't know, Julie, you want to touch on that? I would say students in partnered sites, but I think that's the correct term.
Yeah.
So we just had to move more money, is all
Correct.
that. Oh, got it. That was the clarity I needed. So
Okay.
it's just the movement of balancing. Got it.
Yeah, and that would be to legally required by IEPs and placements. So, but it's something that at the time of October we didn't know what students were enrolled and where their settings would be. So,
Thank you.
that will be a big one I'll be touching on as in February when we first start talking about next year's budget. All things at the state level, special ed funding is at the top of my list. You can see that what that increase is. We are tight this year in special ed for items that we legally have to provide to students, and then it's just that are we going to be able to properly afford it in the future, and the impact on the entire student population. So that's big in all my conversations of the state keeps talking about increase in aid. It hasn't hit yet, but it's much needed. So
That's one thing you can advocate for.
okay.
you'll be with us, Julie. You'll advocate. Also, as a sale day.
All right. Page 4 is Fund 21. We had some good examples of. It looks like a lot of money. It's these are really your student activity accounts. We have $500,000 in student activity accounts, and even today I said I needed to run the report because I was trying to put together. But that is every organization, every grade level that keeps fund, every athletic group, general donations, athletic co-curriculars, anybody who's fundraising on their own or fundraising through us for a trip. Those activity groups are allowed to keep their funds. They roll over. They have to follow district policies and procedures, but outside of that, I have no real guidance on how those funds are spent. As long as they have students involved in them and a proper advisor, I can't tell them what to do as long as it's within policy procedure. So not a lot of management. We help with the cash flow, making sure people are turning in and doing proper purchases, trying to be tax exempt, but outside of that, the idea for a projection in this is, I really don't know what those groups are spending their money on or what they plan to raise. So this was a tough one to do a projection for. We know at the end of the year they're going to have a balance. They don't spend all their funds, and they're properly managing it. So next page is our debt service fund. So up top is your Fund 38. That would be any debt issuance not backed by a referendum. We have multiple outstanding, but two main projects: energy efficiency, which has 2 more years on it, and then any of our Field of Dreams debt issuances. So I don't have any variances there. Everything that was planned on for a source and income at the beginning of the year, and debt payments go out on March 1st is all planned for. So no variance in either of those categories. Next page is a lot of our capital funds. So if you recall, when we were going through budget and looking at salaries, we went with a 4% increase across the board. One of the things we did to accommodate that was remove our Fund 41, which is our capital expansion fund levy. So if you see actual and projected for this year is 0 for revenue. I project that Nick is going to have projects to spend that down. That's probably going to reduce. We'll probably try and carry some of that over based on initial next year's budget. I don't see us being able to start that back up right away. CPI came out at 2.95. State's proposing a 3% increase for student revenue. So we're going to be tight for next year. So if we can, offset that, we'll talk. Fund 46 is available to us. We have money in there. That's the one that we do that end of year transfer. If we can utilize those funds for a while until we're able to replenish that capital planning on individual projects, we'll do that. And then Fund 49 is our referendum construction expenses. So that one, again, you see a more detailed report when we do the one. This is just in general. I don't see any variance. We're still have interest coming in. That's our revenue. And then we have a spend, and then whatever is not spent by June 30th is this summer's work to complete projects. So no variance to report there either. Last page, food service. Food service is running really well. I don't know last time I gave an update on it, but they're at a fund balance and a spend down plan. So we're still following that. No variances to report right now. Probably, unfortunately, for us, we're doing too well again, and we'll have get a letter saying we need to spend on our fund balance from what we're seeing. Community service fund, again, community service fund is pretty well known up front. Most of our expense that isn't course related is administration costs, the office, software to run the program. So we know that most programs and classes run at cost neutral. There are some that do not. An example would be Senior Sunrise Breakfast is on Thursday. That's a community event. We don't charge them $4.50 for their breakfast. So there are some that do not make money. So that's why we have a little bit of a fund balance in there that has to be spent down, and then it's supported by a tax levy. And then we already have activity in Fund 99. That's one I rarely ever talk to. That is only WIA events. What happens when we host an event, there's a profit share with WIA. After we pay our cost, anything that retains goes to the district. So it's just this track there. There are some times where we host events that we lose money on, so then Fund 10 unfortunately has to support that. But looked at, we hosted a soccer regional or sectional and made some funding on that. So I just projected that out. So that's the report and the total thing. Outside of what it sounds like what's left needed is a larger insurance conversation. In general, we are tight for this year. We knew that going in, just trying to stay competitive with salaries. Anything I have as far as a conservative estimate has been taken out of this budget. So, that's kind of my warning already halfway through the year. And I have this same conversation with every department, and they say, hey, it'd be nice if we could do this. Right now, chances are I'm not going to be saying come April, hey, we have some favorability, what do you need to replace? They might still be doing that internally with their own budgets. But there's a realistic chance that I come in April and say, we're running a little bit negative, and then variance happens, right? So we look at that, but that's kind of my warning. I've been saying that in all of my meetings whenever I meet with anybody on the budget to be conservative, to know what we're up against, to know that next year is looking doable, but not like we're gonna have a lot to just do what we want with. It's kind of my speech. So that is the general report.
Very helpful, Mark.
Thank you for having us put together.
All right, any additional questions for him? All right, thank you, sir. And we will move to our second citizens forum.
There's 2 policies on the agenda.
I know, it's printed ones. Did we post the agenda
We
with them?
did.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're on the agenda. They were
Okay.
just not on your sheet notes.
All right. Then we will cover those couple of policies.
So we have policy 5330 and policy 5771. We're not recommending that we make any changes to either of these policies. I know you had some questions and we were gonna do some checking in, but I'm gonna let Julie speak to actually both of these policies because they kind of fall into that student service department, and she and I had some conversation around 5771 with the search and seizure as well, but she does have some information around 5330 and just talking with our nurses and just some of their recommendations and conversation that she had with them.
Yeah, so I wanted to provide you with some written information from our nurses that really will hopefully answer your questions in a little bit more detail, because they are very detailed in their monitoring and collection of information and data as we monitor the health and safety of our students. So there was a question about naturopathic doctors and being in the policy. That is a requirement. So by the state, we have to have naturopathic doctors being indicated on this particular policy. So that would not be able to come off of that. Looking at non-FDA approved substances, that was a question I believe from the last meeting. And so essentially, really there's a main concern about health and safety. And when you really break it down, and from a nurse's perspective, especially medical health perspective, that naturopathic doctors are not able to prescribe medications legally, and so that's a big concern. In addition, there's this complementary and alternative medicine process in which they look at what is regulated by the FDA. And when you look at different types of complementary alternative medicines, they don't meet the standards for labeling, potency, and purity. And so their safety, efficacy, and standardized dosing have not been rigorously tested. Therefore, those things are a real concern. This document also goes into like just scenarios and situations related to CBD oil, and so forth, and different things with like essential oils and the risks that could occur. For example, there may be students who have severe allergic reactions to oils and so forth that might require them to have to administer like epinephrine to be able to address that. There are very unique circumstances that we have within our district that respond to these types of things. So essentially, we do allow for self-carried medications, using the regulations when on field trips, but those have to be specifically signed off on and so forth. And then in school, there are stock medications available at the high school for students. So, and then the current examples or case examples for this year are identified below. And this is more just data, just to kind of give you some more background information as to students who may be identified with asthma and environmental triggers that can cause a reaction as to why we wouldn't be, recommending that we would be allowing some of those other non-FDA approved methods to be used. So I'm just kind of summarizing without reading verbatim. Do you have any specific questions as to why we would not have school district staff administer non-FDA approved substances.
Yeah, I mean, as a holistic family, that matters a lot to us. That's what we use. Those are the medications we use. Something as simple as a honey-based cough medicine, something like that. Like, I don't know. I think it's unfortunate if that's being prescribed by a doctor that we're acknowledging.
I know.
It's just kind of thinks that the FDA is what we use as a standard when we are allowed to consume dyes and things that have been found to be harmful and cause cancer and things like that. So, I guess I have nothing more to add other than that, I guess.
Yeah, if it's something we continue to look at, this isn't policy that I'll vote.
I will say that this policy does tend to come up because I think that they are looking at that. We've had this come before us in my short time, I think at least twice. So we'll just continue to bring you whatever we get. I think we all have some understanding of that. It's just a really tight guideline. But we'll continue to work on it and pick at it and ask questions when they come up.
Yeah, and they do, our nurses have a very strong connection to the Wisconsin DPI and the guidelines and the provisions that are recommended. So if anything changes, they're going to be on top of that, for sure.
So Allison, you're saying we're not even gonna discuss 5771, I guess?
No, we can talk about
Okay, I'm just curious.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so, oh, you're gonna talk to Lee, go ahead.
Sure, what I remembered was, we had a conversation about, the searching, like if we have to, what gender, how the gender
Yep.
matches,
Yeah, the
right?
student gender, it's the last paragraph in green.
Correct.
Conducted by a person of the student's gender in the presence of another staff member of the same gender. And my question is, how are we gonna establish that?
So what does that look like? I think that's the first thing you wanna know, right?
Yeah, to
So-
protect our staff and our students from making the
on
wrong
both
decision.
sides. So first of all, I think we should define search. I think that's a good spot to start. So search means, could you empty your pockets? Can you take off your shoes? Can we look in your backpack?
Yeah, this is intimate personal belongings.
Yeah, we're not going on person.
On person.
Right, so whatever their belongings are.
And
So-
there's two in the room. And if the student is such that, I actually asked, about this as well, and Matt can join in on this if at the high school or Pat at the middle school. If there is a student that would become agitated, unruly, defensive, you're not gonna search any of those sorts of things, that would be like an immediate, we're going to ask to have SRO. And availability, I mean, if we're to that point where we're having to ask a student to take off their shoes, empty their bag, those sorts of things, one of our SROs is usually in that room already. So there's not, the intimate belongings means their bag, their shoes, empty your pockets. So there's not a touching of the person, the student.
Purse, backpack.
Backpack. Yeah.
So intimate is the
it's an
strange
interesting
word.
It is a strange word.
Yeah.
You could just make it personal belongings?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. I mean,
I think a purse, I guess maybe is the most thing I think of intimate
Yeah.
belongings because.
where you would have something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
private
girls
in
might
there.
have fem care in them,
Yeah.
or, something,
or a
yeah.
wallet.
Yeah,
I guess.
in their wallet, right. ID.
But I think that's where we were hung up,
Yeah.
right? It just feels weird because
Yeah.
intimate means.
Well, and with harassment or whatever word, you don't wanna open that up, cause it could go both ways, right? And we don't need any unwanted situations here.
We would always have 2 people in the room, and we would honor that gender need. There be a concern with that too.
Does that answer your question, that one? Okay, all right.
So let's, we need to approve them unless you guys have questions on them. Let's approve them separately.
I'll make a motion to approve which number is it?
5330.
5330, without any changes.
I'll second it.
Any conversation? All's in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Motion carried. All right, and then the next one.
I'll make a motion to approve policy 5771 as presented.
And are we keeping the word intimate in there?
Can we take it out?
Personal, personal.
Yes, yeah, with removing the word intimate.
Yeah.
There you go. Got that, Dana?
I'll second.
All right, motion and second. Any other conversation on that one? All's in favor?
Aye.
All's opposed? Motion carried on that one. All right. And we're really to the end of.
Well, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
To Julie and maybe Mark. With the changes, I'm gonna bring up Title IX just as a question. Are there any things that you guys are having to do now with the recent announcement that Title IX is being, I'll just say halted, canceled, whatever? I know there's no written order or anything, but is there anything different that our district is dealing with right now with the announcement last week?
I would caution.
Yeah, we
not
can't.
post it.
It's not on our. We
Just
can't.
my caution.
Send an email or something. Okay.
Just because we're still in board meetings.
Yep.
My caution from my end.
Yes, on our agenda.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Then we'll go to citizens forum. Yes.
I'm sorry. I'll keep it under 5 minutes.
Thank you.
First of all, if we're doing two
Name, address.
Oh, sorry, Amy Shores, W598 Huffle Park Drive, Pulaski. If we're doing so good with food service, can we start ordering better food? Just an idea, like more nutritious, maybe organic sometimes, or just not Uncrustables. Second, you guys know that safety is super important to me. I speak about it every time we have an SRO update. I don't think it's fair to Jen to just hear me talk about it. That's not the word I would use at home, but at home, you guys should all, I feel like this should be your number one focus as a school board is the safety of our kids. Last year, we spent half of a year not doing anything because we were supposed to be getting a curriculum together and those 3 school resource officers learning each other and blah, blah, blah. Well, now here we are halfway into year 2, supposedly the first full year for them, and they still don't have any consistency between the Hobart and Pulaski. There's no fairness, there's no consistency. If we're gonna have 2 police stations, it needs to work. Right now it's not working. Can it work? Probably, but they're not working together, and whose responsibility is that? Yours, administration's, theirs. To me, it's, we only had 4 safeties at the middle school, but they have one of the, besides the high school, the highest percentage of officer presence. What's happening? We have a Hobart officer that spends almost all of his time at Lenoy and Hillcrest, and they're getting 200% more safety time than any other school in this district. That is not okay. Why aren't we spending all of that time in each of our schools, making sure each of our schools are safe for each of our kids? They're not on the same page. When they said they were working on curriculum last year, they just said tonight it's the same curriculum they've already done. So what are we wasting all this time on? Allison, you're absolutely right. Like there's not okay, if you have 100 kids, where's the personal connections? And if we're policing 83% of their time at the high school, why do we have SROs? Why don't we just have cops that stay at the high school? Because if Hunter can't spend an hour or 2 hours at a different school without having to go back to the high school, what's happening at the high school? If there's emergencies, call 911. Otherwise, why isn't Hunter doing what he needs to do at our elementary schools? I know I sound like I'm on it. This is just so important, and we gotta stop wasting so much time. We're a year into this since they started, and we still don't have any consistency or real answers with it. So what's happening at the high school is my question, that we don't have officers at all of our elementary schools. Glenbrook has 515 students, 91 hours this year, 0.18. Sunnyside, 500 students, 125 hours, 0.25 per student. Fairview, with 100 students, gets 78 hours. Why? Why are they spending almost 80 hours at Fairview with a fifth of the kids? then we're at Lenoy and Hillcrest, which are at almost over 40% for each of them. So what do we do? Like, why, does there need to be a schedule? Does there need to be more oversight? It feels to me like every day should be scheduled for those officers, because a year into this, there's not any consistency. So there needs to be a schedule, in my opinion, for all schools to get fair time. Maybe probably can't be the entire amount of time, because obviously middle school and high school is going to have a little bit more issues, but our elementary schools should certainly be a little bit more fair, and not 80 hours at our smallest school at the same rate as our two biggest schools are getting about the same amount of time. So it feels like there needs to be more arms around this. You guys need more oversight, which is what I said last year when they started this. And if there needs to be an actual schedule for those SROs, then there needs to be an actual schedule, because if our kids aren't doing all the drills and the safety things and making those connections, then our schools aren't safe, and that's our number one priority. And I think I got it all off of my stretching. So please spend more time with that.
Thank you, Amy.
Anybody else? All right. Next workshop meeting is February 5th at Fairview. We'll talk about insurance and athletics and activities. We will now move to closed session to discuss administrative contracts. Is there anybody in the audience who will be here when we come back out into open session? All right, very good. Then I just need a motion to get us into closed session.
I'll make a motion to move into closed session.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Have a good night, everybody.